Looks like most people have gotten connected, so welcome everybody and excited for you to be here in the session today. My name is Paige Sharp. I'm with the Indiana Arts Commission. Excited to see everybody. And I'm pleased to welcome you to Catalyze Your Community, local arts agencies with some fabulous leaders that you'll learn a great deal from here today, including Kayla Myers from the Community Foundation, or you can easily just read your screen. Ann McKim and Ann Fields Monical and Kyle Rupert, who all do amazing work in the stratosphere. Before I turn it over to them, we just have a few little housekeeping items to go over. Just remain muted during the presentation until Q&A, unless your presenters are like, hey, just chime in anytime. Feel free to utilize the chat function, introduce yourself and ask questions throughout the session. They're happy to address those questions. Rename yourself if you'd like to do that at this point. If you haven't learned about how to do it, you just do so by hovering over your image and clicking the three dots and then selecting rename. You can caption if you would like. That's available to you by clicking on the closed caption button on the bottom of the navigation bar. And if you have any questions or tech issues throughout the session, feel free to send a note in the direct message and chat to your tech host. And with that, I am turning it over to our presenters. I don't know which of the Anns are going to start, or maybe it's Kayla or maybe it's Kyle. Welcome everyone, and thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks, Paige. Thank you all once again for joining us. So my name is Kayla Myers. I'm with the Community Foundation of St. Joseph County. My organization has served as a regional arts partner with the Indiana Arts Commission since 1999 for a 6-county region, which includes Elkhart, Fulton, Kosciuszko, Marshall, Stark, and St. Joseph counties. So our work through the Community Foundation is in a variety of areas, with arts and culture being one of our primary initiatives. So in addition to serving as the regional arts partner with the IAC, we support local arts organizations through our competitive Arts Everywhere grants, regular convening and educational opportunities for local arts organizations, and our Community Foundation Performing Arts Series. I'll be serving in the role of facilitator, and we have 3 individuals serving on our panel for the session today. So we have Ann McKim, Executive Director with the Arts Council of Southwestern Indiana, Ann Fields Monical, Chief Operating Officer for the Tippecanoe Arts Federation, and then Kyle Rupert, Director of Jasper Community Arts. So I'm going to ask each of the panelists to take about 5 minutes to share the brief history of their organizations, how they got started, what their current structure is, and how they support the art scenes in their communities. I'm going to go ahead and start with Ann McKim with the Arts Council of Southwestern Indiana. Ann?
Thank you, Kayla, for that introduction. So I'm Ann McKim, Executive Director of the Arts Council of Southwestern Indiana, and we serve as the Region 10 Regional Arts Partner for the IAC. We cover 10 counties: Knox, Davies, Du Bois, Pike, Perry, Posey, Spencer, Warwick, Gibson, and Vanderburgh. And I always have to write that down because it's a lot of counties. I hope if you're interested in the work of developing a local arts agency or an arts nonprofit, and you're located in one of these counties, that you do reach out to me after this conversation so that we can follow up. A bit of the history of our organization. The Arts Council has been around for a while. We were incorporated as a nonprofit in 1970 as the Evansville Arts and Education Council. The organization originally began as a signature project of the Junior League of Evansville, and was project focused, holding an arts event and investing in youth arts programs. Something for you all to keep in mind if you're in the early phases of your idea for an arts org, think about the partners and the organizations in your community. Is there an already existing entity that you could work with, or that could even serve as your fiscal agent before you attain nonprofit status? There are many philanthropic organizations that have the structure, resources, and leadership in place that help support new community initiatives like this. Quick fun fact, my grandmother's signature is on the Arts Council's 1970 Articles of Incorporation because she was serving as the secretary of the Junior League at the time. And I had absolutely no idea of her involvement until I applied for my first IAC grant and was digging around in our founding documents. So you never know, what you're doing now could have massive importance to one of your grandchildren in 50 years. In 1986, the Arts Council became one of the 12 original regional arts partners of the IAC, serving roughly the same footprint as today. Our name was changed in 1991 to the Arts Council of Southwestern Indiana, reflecting our status as the arts partner, as well as our extension of our services to surrounding counties. A note here, branding and rebranding, branding and rebranding. I can't stress enough how important it is to be very careful and intentional and thorough in your efforts of initial branding of a new arts organization. The term arts is broad, which can lead to confusion, but for some people it is microscopically specific, which can also lead to a lack of awareness of the full services that you're offering. So as you move through the process of developing an arts org, don't just think about all of the amazing work that you're going to do, think about how you're going to tell people who you are and what you're doing. Jumping forward a few decades, in 2005, the Arts Council became the fiscal agent for a tax levy called the Community Arts Fund. A bit more on that later. And then in 2007, the Arts Council relocated as part of the community's efforts to revitalize downtown Evansville. Community leaders, both elected and corporate leaders, recognized it was essential to include arts and culture in the big picture long-term planning of our city. And so we operated out of a gallery that housed in a facility called Innovation Point for several years, which created connectivity between the arts and cultural sector and the economic development sector. The Chamber of Commerce, the Economic Development Coalition, the Growth Alliance for Greater Evansville, all economic development organizations were also housed in the building, along with some offices of the University of Southern Indiana. The gallery and Innovation Point really centralized the arts in Evansville and energized the local creative community. We were able to host exhibits and things like that in a really lovely space, as well as concerts and other performances. In January of 2019, we completed a $1.2 million capital campaign and renovation of a new, more contemporary art space and rooftop art deck. Watching the clock, that's my not so brief history of the organization, which brings us to where we are today and what we're doing. As I mentioned earlier, the term arts is broad, and so too, therefore, are activities and programs in the community. You can see on the slide, we have images of concerts on the roof. One thing that I'm so proud of is that we really have become a respected all ages venue for our concert series. There's a couple of public art images. One piece that we funded, the marker on the bottom middle image, and then one piece that we helped broker the commission of. A corporate partner reached out and we guided them through the process of putting together an RFP, distributing it, helping them review submissions, really coaching them on the cost of what it means to invest in the arts. So this is brand new and we're quite proud of it. We also have our Community Arts Fund grant program. We put out about $50,000 into arts education projects each year. Kayla, would you mind flipping to the next slide? Gallery exhibits, you can see the kiddos on the harps and violins. We help fund some of that program. Down in the bottom left, you'll see Anna, formerly of the IAC, leading a workshop in our space as part of some of the services we provide as the regional arts partner. Parks Fest, which is a huge free music festival in Garvin Park, and a lot of collaborations with other organizations. The Children's March on Evansville image is one that we're facilitating an art exhibit for, along with the Children's Museum of Evansville and some social advocacy organizations. A great deal of this programming is funded through the Community Arts Fund. that I referenced earlier, which is created by Indiana Code 361013. And it's a tax levy of half of a cent on every $100 of assessed value, property value within a school corporation. And I bring this up because I really encourage you, if you're thinking about creating an arts institution, to look at this tool. It's one of the most flexible and certainly most sustainable ways that we're able to distribute arts funds throughout Vanderburgh County. And anybody who wants to talk to me about that later, of course, I can answer all those questions. Okay, I think my 5 minutes are up, and I was supposed to touch on our structure. So quickly, we're board governed. We originally were a membership organization, but transitioned to a board organization. We include board members and non-board members on our committees that oversee each of the aspects of our work. And we pull these people from arts communities, also from the education community and philanthropic and corporate sectors. And really, I think we can turn it over to the next arts org, so I don't take the whole session for myself.
Thanks so much, Anne. That was great. I'm going to now ask Ann Fields Monical with Tippecanoe Arts Federation to share about their organization. Ann?
Sure. Thank you, Kayla. So I think the founding of Ann McKim's organization down in Evansville in some ways is similar to the Tippecanoe Arts Federation, but there are some differences that I would love to talk about. And those differences mainly were based on, what was going on in our own community and what worked for us. So the Tippecanoe Arts Federation today is an umbrella organization. We have many different members who are either individual arts practitioners, or we also serve as kind of a meeting place, as well as a mailbox for lots of other volunteer run arts organizations. So we have some pretty interesting subgroups that meet and use us as kind of their umbrella. We serve 14 counties. We're in North Central Indiana. So those counties are Benton, Carroll, Cass, Clinton, Fountain, Howard, Jasper, Newton, Montgomery, Pulaski, Tippecanoe, Tipton, Warren, and White. And so we are the biggest, region geographically. That's about 500,000 people that we serve today. So if you are out there, I see someone from Lafayette is on the chat. And hello, Lexi. Nice you could join us too from Attica. I'd be happy to talk to you about the arts in your community and maybe help connect you with resources. But I want you to know that the model of what TAF is today was not really what it was founded like in the beginning. Today we have educational opportunities where we have an after-school arts program. We have an instrument library that lends instruments to kids. So you can see on this slide that there's 2 kids participating in our music lessons, which actually a lot of times we then partner with kind of one of our member groups, the Indiana Fiddlers Gathering, for instance, to teach old time music, such as fiddle and banjo. So we're sure to work with artists in our region to really create and give opportunities for them to practice their craft and get paid for it. We started First Fridays, which is a community collaboration that was new this year. We've also done some pretty monumental mural projects, as you can see up in the upper right, which I'll touch on how those kind of came to be, and how those really were, again, kind of a grassroots partnership that evolved into something amazing. The Tippecanoe Arts Federation was originally established and incorporated in 1976. So again, you have your 70s, the founding of, I think, a lot of local arts agencies in our state. It was originally founded by community members who kind of wanted a model for arts advocacy. And its main operation in the beginning was the publication of an arts calendar, just something that would help people in our community understand what was going on in the arts. So as you can see, not much of a presenting or, arts producing, just arts supporting organization in the beginning. The group hosted kind of an annual midsummer, I think it was called Midsummer Arts festival. And they would, have music and art in the streets, again, drawing attention, highlighting the other arts and culture organizations that were going on. They started a membership program that then kind of, I think, lived up to the name Federation, and that then they would kind of pool funds to do projects and to promote each other. Following kind of the Midsummer Arts Festival, then it sort of evolved over the years into the Taste of Tippecanoe, which then incorporated local restaurants in the event, while still having artists selling their work, stages with performers, again, promoting the role of the arts. But by doing this and being able to kind of leverage, some local funding, like from our community foundation, TAF was able then to grow a bit. And in the 1990s, our our county public library was selling the Albert A. Wells Memorial Library building, which was originally built in 1926, kind of that Carnegie style library building. And the Tippecanoe Arts Federation was able to purchase this building. And basically by then they had a board of directors and then some like working committees, including this kind of very active group of individual artists who actually renovated themselves part of the library. They basically put drywall over some existing bookshelves and created an art gallery. And so when we renovated the building then in like 2018, it was fun because we were taking the drywall off and they had left little papers and things, saying who had helped. And some of those names were people who were still in our community, that I work with. So it was really amazing to see how a lot of this, again, was the, sweat of people in the community who wanted a new opportunity for other artists. With the building of kind of the 3 galleries, then there was also a central stage space. I mentioned the Indiana Fiddlers Gathering, which was a very active music group. They do like an annual festival up here that people come from all over the country to see. They, wanted a home base as well. So they helped through grant writing. We have a local North Central Health Services Foundation that does invest luckily in culture and quality of life. So they were able to also get funding to redo kind of some rooms so they were more acoustic friendly. They built a small platform stage. And so again, building up the building to be a place where other arts organizations who paid like a small membership fee could then use the space, even if it was just for their monthly board meeting. TAF still itself wasn't really though presenting a whole lot of things on its own, right? It was just kind of a hub of cultural activity. And I think you kind of see a similar model sometimes in small communities where they have maybe an old library building or just a historic home. I know Logansport Art Association, they have a little art center that they operate out of a historic building. And, their interest was specifically in presenting classes and arts education focused things out of that building, so they evolved differently than in our community where we really had a big enough community that we wanted to unite them all. So when we got our space, it was then evolved into kind of more of a, I guess, community center model, if that makes sense. But what's really neat is, in 1998, when the Indiana Arts Commission started the regional arts partnership in the form that it is now, TAF joined as an original partner there. So that was when I guess TAF started broadening its focus more to the counties outside of Tippecanoe. And so by that, we then were able to build the network of TAF members. So now we have, Tipton has a civic theater. They have a little library that does arts programming. Out in Flora, their little library does arts programming. And so we were able to, through this regional arts partner program and then the regional initiative grants, really help connect these these small organizations who wanted to do arts projects with those funds. And so again, TAF not setting out to do any of its own programming really at this point still, a lot of it was still supporting other organizations, getting organizations at the table for economic development conversations, and kind of finding a way to connect, especially with community foundations, and then corporate partners who are interested in investing in the arts and helping them kind of funnel those dollars to specific things. Really in the mid 2000s, our local community foundation of Greater Lafayette, they kind of opened up the field of interest grants a little more, and that Taft's new executive director at the time was very interested in starting an after school program because that was a need. The Art Reach Instrument Lending Program, again, that was started in the mid 2000s. So then you see us taking on kind of our more arts advocacy plus arts presentation role, but almost 20 years ago. That's kind of weird, to think. Really though, the way we see our role in our region kind of evolving, and I know Lexi from Attica can speak to this because she actually wrote an arts project support grant, but she also, sorry to speak for you, Lexi, but this was actually one of my examples. Through the Main Street program there, they connected with us and we were able to funnel some funding we had gotten from the Wabash Heartland Innovation Network for mural program to be completed in Attica. And so that's a good illustration of, I guess, our strategy going forward is finding those pots of money that exist out there. So for instance, I mentioned North Central Health Services they operate kind of mental health facilities and addiction treatment centers, but they have this, foundation that does give grants. So every year, TAF actually gets about $250,000 to $300,000 that we re-grant to other cultural organizations for capacity building, capital projects. And so with that, again, we are able to continuously apply for that chunk of money to then give to others to complete projects that help build their, building. Some people get a parking lot. Some people get, copper coil for the hearing impaired, system installed in their theater. And so these things, again, we're all doing are helping connect, I guess, smaller folks in smaller communities with, funding that maybe isn't immediately in their town, but it's, within the region. And that's really a model we have seen work well. And so like Anne mentioned, you do have to think about other community partners who you can bring to the table. And so in some cities, for instance, like Kokomo, their city government actually gives money for operation support of cultural organizations. Now that amount, I know has fluctuated over the years, but whereas in Lafayette, we do not have that kind of arrangement. Any dollars the city kind of invests are a contractual process. So for instance, we have done several mural projects for the city of Lafayette. And that was, a contract by contract base. It wasn't just operation support. So you have to kind of look, in your community and see what resources are there and also what do you need, and then figure out how to really attract those to your community. Be that through, a big funnel, like a larger regional organization, or even the state. And so I think now we will let Kyle talk because I went a little over too. Sorry.
No worries. Thank you. Two great organizations on example. There's not enough time to, I think, talk about every arts organization or local arts agency that's out there, but I appreciate the time. Jasper Community Arts, created by city ordinance, 1975. It was kind of a multi-step process in terms of why the department was created. We are a department of the city of Jasper. Just like the Park and Rec department, just like the police department, gas, wastewater, arts. So I get to attend a lot of very interesting meetings that I probably wouldn't have access to otherwise. So that's a lot of fun. Get to learn a lot. But how did we get started? Well, you could say that the earliest we could trace our roots back to really was just after World War II. A lot of soldiers come back, and there was a group of people in the area that started a theatrical troupe. Back then, they were known as the Kundek Players, and they performed at Kundek Hall, which is now part of St. Joe's Parish Center. St. Joseph Church is a beautiful church here in Jasper. And they did that for a while. And then another group formed shortly after that. Groups tend to break off. So another group formed with some of the same members called Jasper Little Theater, came to be known as Jasper Players. Fast forward 70 plus years, and that's now today our community theater, Actors Community Theater. So we kind of have a shared ancestor, if you will. But from that, they performed in a lot of different places, 4-H fairgrounds, typically over the summer, and Kundek Hall still, but then that was getting used more for one of the schools. And then some of the members' parents and others that enjoyed coming to those shows felt like we really needed a purpose-built space for performances. We needed a theater for people to perform in and to come to shows to. And so we really got our start as a department, as an organization, through the performance side of things. And so they started going, a small group of business leaders and other individuals started going door to door in the community, talking up the project, trying to rally support, raise funds. They raised, I believe, just under $700,000 back then to build the building. And as they were talking about this building and all they wanted to do, they had to stave off some comments, or people thought, oh, this would be great. We're working on a new school. It could be a gymnasium too, or we could put a skating rink in there. That'll be great. And they had to, no. It's just performance. That's what we're doing. That's all we're doing. And I shouldn't say it's all we're doing. That's the vision. That's the purpose. So as they were working on the building plans, they started talking about how we're going to run this thing and how's it going to operate. And that's where the thought of the city should get involved. Why not have the city involved? This could be an excellent recruitment tool. Of course, we had business leaders that were part of this project, and I thought this would be an excellent recruitment tool and talent retainment tool that we could utilize in addition to providing those experiences and those opportunities for those who are living in our community. And so they drew up a business plan or proposal around that idea, and they took that to city council to show them that value. And they had all kinds of guidelines, how it's going to operate and how it would work, and that ultimately was a good investment for the community. And they were pretty convincing. The council agreed. And in 1975, they passed an ordinance establishing the department. And then in 1977, what's today known as the Jasper Arts Center was open to the public. And then the Auditorium Corporation that had been created, they turned the keys over to the city, and then they disbanded because their work at that point had been completed. Over the years, the last 46 or so years, we've grown quite a bit since that time in terms of the amount of experiences or opportunities that we seek to provide. We started out with, I think, 2 employees, 1 or 2 staff members. We have 10 now, and about 2/3 of our budget, of our operating costs, I should say, come from the city budget, about half to 2/3, depending on the year. And the rest come from ticket fees, service fees, and then donations and grant support like that we receive through the Arts Council of Southwestern Indiana and the Indiana Arts Commission. That makes up a portion of our total annual operating budget. We have our local Friends of group that has supported us over the years in a few different ways, whether it was offsetting costs for a certain staff position or a programming grant. So multiple sources of funding that help support the work that we do. We're primarily focused on providing live performance opportunities. Jasper is a fairly rural community, and so we try to bring in artists of varying types So world music, jazz, country, rock, folk, dance of all kinds. Of course, these are very large genres that have all kinds of subgenres within them. And we try to bring in a little bit of everything throughout the year. And then we have a visual arts element. We have now up to 18 exhibits per year that feature local artists and national artists and international artists. Again, trying to bring those experiences close to home for folks who may not have a chance to go to places in Evansville or in Indianapolis or Chicago or New York or Paris or wherever it may be. So we try to bring pieces of that here. And then we also offer workshops and classes to try to spark that creativity and that passion and that appreciation. Not everyone's going to be an artist. That's okay. But to some degree, we all appreciate art in some way. And so we just try to provide that experience, that opportunity, and get people thinking that way. And then we also have an education component. Every grade level from K through 12 has the opportunity to see one live performance each year. So we're very proud of that. We've been able to do that for a very long time. And then we also offer professional development for educators through the Kennedy Center's Partners in Education program. And then we also offer artist outreach into the schools as well for that. So those are our key components. And then we provide space for our community members. So we do have a lot of nonprofits that utilize our spaces for their artistic endeavors. And so we are able to, for a community our size, take on the brunt of the costs and liabilities associated with a lot of that, and then provide them a space or an opportunity for a space. So very proud of that. We operate with an 11-member board that serves as or has the fiduciary responsibility of our department and oversees those decisions. And then each of our areas, whether it be performance or visual arts or education, special events, are made up of a commit or governed by committees that are made up of a combination of board members, staff, and then members from the community. And what I like about the committees is that they don't have to just be Jasper residents. So we try to serve the county at large. And so we have people who live within the county, outside of Jasper even, that help contribute to that, because DuBois County is about 43,000 people. Jasper, as the county seat, is the hub. People tend to travel to Jasper frequently. So it's important to get those perspectives as well, so that we're trying to provide those experiences for as many people as possible. We just opened a new facility, the 10 Clark Cultural Center in downtown Jasper. So we now manage 2 facilities. We're right next to the library. Our library is a partner in this project. So we've done a lot of co-programming with them over the last 2 years as we got closer to this project coming to completion. And we've got a lot of new plans for the future as well. So that is a brief history of JCA.
Thank you all so much for sharing. That was great. So Kyle touched on this some already, but I'm wondering if you can share a bit more on how your organizations connect with various constituents, such as local leaders and teachers. I don't know if anyone wants to take that.
I would love to. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Kyle.
Please, I insist.
Okay. Well, I'll be really quick. So I think one of the very strategic ways we do it is we make sure staff, board members, committee members also are sitting and involved on other types of community like membership organizations. So for instance, we have like Third House for our community, which is a group that really meets and learns about like the legislature, sorry. And so, our local representatives, are sure to be at that. And so they get to kind of rub elbows with them and also hear what types of bills, they're bringing to the state legislature. So I think that's a really great way, kind of other types of philanthropy organizations are a great way to connect. We have, deep involvement with like Kiwanis and Rotary. They often will, fund our after school program or things like that. But we also had board members who are members of that organization. And so I think by organically kind of making sure maybe the people you are using to set up your organization kind of represent those other types of interest groups. So think of city government, county government. For instance, TAF, I'm, the chair of the West Lafayette Public Art team. So I work with the city of West Lafayette on a lot of things. And we have another person who's on the county public art team. And so I think by making sure we're at the table, that one connects us with new people and helps us identify maybe new needs that TAF could possibly fill, but it also makes sure that the voice of the arts is kind of at the table when decisions are being made that might affect our community. So Kyle, I'll let you go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just gonna, all great points. Our education committee, which makes a lot of the recommendations for our education-based programming, is made up of a teacher from each grade level from within the school corporation, and then a parent as well, so that we try to get that buy-in and not do things for them or at them, but do things with them. And they're the ones who are working with students. Parents are the ones who are very interested in what their students are experiencing. So we try to bring in the connections that we have and what we see out there when we go, this artist is doing this work. And they said, well, these are what we're seeing in the classroom, or this is what I'm seeing at home. And this would be really great if we could bring these two things together. So we try to involve the community members that have the closest experience to the field we're working within. So with education, be parents and teachers. That's all I was going to mention.
Yeah, so similarly, we have a youth arts committee. So if we're connecting with educators or the school corporation, we have representatives, teachers, and parents who sit on that committee. We also, through our bylaws, have 2 representatives from the EVSC, which is the Evansville Vanderburg School Corporation, who sit on our board at all times currently. We have the superintendent of the EVSC, as well as the director of all fine arts through the EVSC, which is a great way of being able to communicate, and not just to share our information out, but as Kyle mentioned, to hear what's actually needed within the schools. As far as other demographics, so we have a representative from the city. The director of the Department of Metropolitan Development sits on our board of directors. And that's a great way of understanding what's going on at a city level and making sure that, yes, we do have a seat at the table when there are big conversations about arts and culture and long-term planning. For collaborations, the executive directors and leadership of all of the cultural institutions in Evansville, and Evansville is a bit bigger than Jasper, but we have a museum, a philharmonic, a children's museum, an African-American museum, a wartime museum, a zoo, and the Right Time Museum, which is an historic home, and a nature preserve. And so the leaders of those organizations, we convene ourselves pretty frequently to understand what each other is doing, how we can be supportive of each other. And for me, because I'm a funder in that room, it's a way for me to hear what needs the museum has. Are they able to serve the children who are visiting them, or are they able to serve the retired folks? And as far as having, the biggest thing I think that I would say to anyone who's thinking about a nonprofit arts organization is making sure that there is representation on the board. And that's something that we struggle with. I don't think that we're perfect. Our strategic plan very clearly says that we need to have more BIPOC representation on our board of directors in order to serve those communities, access those communities, get feedback from those communities. We're making progress, but I think that that's a big deal. And then as far as staff, I'm very fortunate because our team is small. There's 3 of us, but one of one of the staff is a working musician, and so that's a great way of having access to the music community. That kind of thing makes a big difference in terms of our the authenticity of the relationships that we have with folks that we're serving.
Thanks so much. And I know we're starting to get some questions in the chat, and we'll have some time for those at the end. One other thing I wanted to make sure that I asked is just if you have any tips or pointers for those looking to get started in this work. So if you could go back and start over, what would you suggest for those starting out?
No one's fighting to go first on this one. So I wasn't around 50 years ago when the organization started, but what we've counseled people from smaller communities around Evansville who have come to us with this kind of question is sort of in line with what we just talked about, making sure that there's representation on the board so that from the very beginning, you are serving your whole community. And that your reputation is such that you are inclusive, that you are accessible. I think it's a lot harder to build that at 50 years in, to change that reputation, than it would be to from the start make it clear that a pillar of your organizational belief is being diverse and inclusive.
And I would add on to what Anne said, and something that has served us well, and I would encourage anyone looking to start an arts organization to really focus on at the beginning, is having a clear vision or mission, what it is you're wanting to accomplish. That has served us well over the years. Not perfect. We certainly have strayed from it at times, or ballooned a little bit beyond the scope of that mission or vision. So it's always important to reevaluate and check in and make sure that are we on the right path? Is this still serving our community? But I think ultimately between that and then what Anne was talking about with representation would be planning. You can't over plan, I don't think, starting out. And not even just in terms of what your organization is looking to do, what you're looking to accomplish, or what need you're looking to meet, or who you're looking to serve, but also thinking about physical spaces too, or your organization in terms of how is it operated. Maybe right now it's 2 people, but in a 5-10 years down the road, in our cases 45, 50, 70 years down the road, dream big, think big. Like what would it be? Like in a perfect world, would you have someone who would be a director of marketing, or someone who would be community outreach, et cetera, et cetera? And in that way, when those moments come, if they come, you're ready to go. You've thought through it. Now it may need to be tweaked, or may need to be changed, but you've at least thought about it a little bit. And I think that's something where, for us, going back, it's not really well documented. Hey, what happens when we get a second facility? What happens when this part of our organization needs to grow because the community needs this, or needs this need met? And so that planning process early on, and just thinking through all those scenarios, it can be a lot, but I think it would serve any new organization well down the road. Also, board succession. Just throw that in at the end.
Yeah, that's actually kind of, I think Kyle and Ann both touched on what I would say the 2 key things you need. I think being able to kind of write down those belief statements and make sure everyone you're involving identifies with those is super important, so you're all heading in the right direction. I know I have sat down with some people, where at first they say, well, we want an arts council. And then, I asked them each, what does that mean to you? And, one person, well, we want to have classes. And then one person, well, we want to have a gallery. Well, we want to publish a magazine, like all those different things. And so I think those are like the, I guess, kind of outcomes, right, of your work. But really, what is the goal? Why are you setting out to do these things? And is your community really excited about it in general too? I think that is why representation though matters. So once you can say what you're about, make sure that's then resonating with the people who you're setting out to serve. And part of that, again, can be by making sure your board or your working committee or whoever is starting out, in the right direction and is representative of your community. Yeah, that.
Kayla, can I jump back in for a second and point out to all of the panel participants or everyone who's sitting in on this, how fortunate they are to have Anne and Kyle as part of this panel. They are so smart, and those are such great points. And I just can't stress enough how much wisdom is coming out of these people.
Well, if I could, and that is very kind, but one thing I was going to add, it kind of touched on what Anne without an E was saying. I had to say, because I thought people might get confused which Anne I was talking about. Having a good group of people with you, or that you surround yourself with, is so vital as well. And as the wisdom, the part as far as the having the mission and everything, while I firmly believe that, I have to check in with those, coming into an organization, with those who have been around the organization, to look back and say, hey, how were things back then? What would be different? So I have to give credit where credit is due. Doreen Lechner, who's my technical director, facility manager, she has been, as far as providing context for the organization. Donna Shepard, both have been here Doreen's been here more than 30 years, Donna nearly 30 years, provide that context for us. So if you can find people, maybe if it's a new organization, you wouldn't have that necessarily, but people who maybe have been in other organizations or people who have been in the community for a while, that support what you're working on, but then can provide context or some of that history too, can help bridge any divides that might exist. So lean on others. I don't pretend that I know everything. In fact, I'm pretty proud that I don't, so that I have a reason to go talk to people and find out what they know. So I appreciate it, Anne. I will go home and I will tell my wife to watch that first part of that clip so she can see, like, hey, look, she said it, I'm wise. But then don't watch the rest of it. But I have to give props where props are due.
Well, Anne, don't you have, Anne McKim is so wise too. She has a list of resources. Do we want to go ahead and share those?
Yes.
Other questions?
Yes, I know we're getting shorter on time here. So yes, Anne, if you want to briefly go through the resources so that we have about, we're getting close so that we at least have 10 minutes for questions. And I'll also share these in the chat too.
Absolutely. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel necessarily. There are a lot of resources out there published by organizations that are well-staffed, well-funded, and have put in the research to really see best practices in these places. We've put a couple up here that Kayla is linking in the chat. Two of these links are to Americans for the Arts. One of them is just kind of explaining what is the definition of a local arts agency. And that's incredibly important when you're speaking to community leaders or when you're speaking to partners and you're trying to get people on board. Having the vocabulary, having the explanation can be really helpful to for people understanding your vision. An Arts Council Development Handbook, I was delighted when I found this. It's by the Georgia Council for the Arts, and it is like 40 pages long. It's enormous, and everything that you could, a really step-by-step practical guide, a lot of information on asset mapping, on recruiting partners. When Kyle talks about plan and plan and plan, you can't overplan. This tool is one that I think would benefit anyone, and actually one that I might spend more time with rereading just to do even a little bit of a check and adjustment on some of the things going on with our organization. Starting an organization, another Americans for the Arts publication. If you haven't spent time with that organization, by the way, there's so much there that is helpful, so much there that's done that I use in fundraising, I use for communicating to people the value of the arts and why they're so important. But the Starting an Arts Organization page, there's a lot of links to various kinds of organizations. So to the point that maybe you're doing an arts council, maybe you're looking at a local arts agency designation, maybe it is just a cultural district that you're trying to implement. And you can read through iteration by iteration and see what really might work best in your community. And then finally, just how to start a nonprofit. This is the nuts and bolts, the legal and the financial information that is relevant across the nonprofit industry. I would say also that if anyone does go further with this, certainly reach out. I'm happy to share our bylaws. I'm happy to share, pieces of our financial controls. You want our document retention policy? There's a lot out there that that you can look at and borrow and kind of look at what's worked for other organizations. Those links are just the tip of the iceberg in terms of arts organization information out there. So if you have an interest in pursuing this work, don't be overwhelmed. There's so much, but these are 4 really good resources to start.
Thank you so much. And we went ahead and we put our email addresses up here as well. Please feel free to reach out. We're happy to connect with you after the presentation. And we'll go ahead and open up for any questions or comments, which can be placed in the chat box. I did see Corey had a great question here that Anfield's Monical had addressed within the chat, but I'll go ahead and to get us started, read this out loud. So she asked, do your art organizations work with your county or region's destination marketing organizations, either for funding or for assistance with promotion of programs?
Other cultural institutions in Evansville work more closely with cultural destination marketing than the Arts Council. We have in the past, when there have been initiatives for just general asset mapping, we've helped with that. But in general, we don't receive funding, and we are more of a resource for them than vice versa, I would say.
And we work with them in a similar capacity. There is a small grant that we are fortunate enough to receive that helps with the promotional material.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in and see if you have all checked, with your local CVB. I know ours, they will, if you have an event going on, then they think it will, bring tourists downtown. Sometimes they will sponsor or even, grant you dollars for that marketing support, just like it sounds like they do in Jasper.
Thank you. And so this wouldn't apply as much for Jasper Community Arts, but for either of the ands, are there any tips for working effectively with city or county government?
I think just having really open avenues of communication. I think that it is it's on you as a leader from the arts community to reach out and build those connections. We have a good relationship with the mayor. As I mentioned, we do have a department head on our board of directors, which is great. As far as the county, there's so much overlapping interest, and we're fortunate that right now is a time that I think community leaders recognize the value in terms of quality of life, but also economic development for having strong arts and cultural organizations. That doesn't always look exactly like, the fantasy of just lots of funding or things. But I don't think that should get people down. I think that there are so many ways that you can connect with and be supported by elected officials. again, if you build that relationship.
I mean, I'll echo Anne what you said. I think our contracts, that we have had with local government have all been about being there, being an engaged citizen. And so by having board members, or again, like staff like me who are on the, mayor's bike and pedestrian commission, I think by just making those connections and really, showing that you are present and you care about the community, and then being able to articulate very clearly and succinctly, here's what we want to do, here's what's in it for the city or the county, being able to show case studies. Again, a lot of times you don't need to be Super Bowl research and hand over a book, but I think kind of illustrating for non-arts people, what a project will look and feel like, to get them excited about it also is very helpful, especially with these public art projects we've been contracted to do places like in Attica. I think sometimes when people actually see what a mural may look like and what building it's going to be on, then that ball kind of gets rolling too. So again, being able to articulate what you want to do and what the outcomes are going to be will be very good at catching the ear of a local government representative.
Thank you. So I think we're about out of time for other questions. I know within the chat, Paige, I'm wondering, Shelbyville, do you know which region that would fall into?
That's in 7. And we have the meetup right after this, so I would encourage you, Brandy, to join us if you can, and we'll unpack kind of where you're at in the stage. And I saw that I think somebody from Rushville is on here as well, and Rushville has a pretty recently established local arts council, and I think they've done a really great job from what I've observed. Of course, we are part of the foundation of that in some small ways, so but I mean, I think there's others on this in this room. I would love to see you in the other room, particularly to do some sharing amongst one another. I think fabulous. So thank you. Any last parting words of wisdom, friends? We got 2 minutes, and then I know the other meetup starts in 5 minutes from now. So I'm so appreciative of all the information you've shared.
Yeah, thank you all so much for joining us, and don't hesitate to reach out to us or to your regional arts partner as well for additional resources.
Great, thank you. And then if you are not joining us in the meetup session, don't forget we have John Green and Sarah Yost Green, who are our keynotes tomorrow. Super excited. And of course, there's links in the schedule to so you can see the recordings that we've had here relatively soon. You can watch that recording too. So thanks everybody, and hope you enjoyed the session.